The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is a game about childhood and adulthood, and time and change and loss. Ocarina of Time's unique mechanic of the protagonist being able to travel between the life stages of a child and adult are one of the few single instances in media where I think time travel is an interesting storytelling device. And this nuanced, unanswerable question of whether Link is a child or an adult is part of what makes his experience in the bottom of the well and the Shadow Temple stand out in particular.
As a kid, Link's adventures are more lighthearted, there's always a happy ending, the world itself is bustling with energy and excitement. Then you turn into an adult. What the fuck?
As Video Game Donkey points out, the game's narrative shifts depending on your character's age. As a child, you face problems a child would face, like people getting hungry or losing their jewelry. And as an adult, you face the threat of numerous genocides and frequent loss. This bleak narrative about what it means to grow up doesn't entirely resonate with me. But it is true that as children, there are some things that we just don't have to deal with in the way we would as adults. It is this that makes the bottom of the well one of the most narratively discordant areas in the game. At this point in the game's storyline, you have progressed through 3 dungeons as a child and 3 dungeons after you've gained the ability to travel through time and become an adult, and you find yourself at Kakariko Village, an area that has been a calm safe house for Link in both timelines, no matter how the world has changed around him. In an instant, that safety is desecrated as a sinister cutscene portrays Link and Shiek arriving at the scene of something terrible, and both being soundly defeated. This isn't the only instance of Link being beat up in this game, but it's the only cutscene I can think of where Link is completely powerless as an adult, and the notion of his age making him capable of handling most anything in Hyrule is deftly shattered, demonstrating a vulnerability his character seldom has. Now here's part of what makes the bottom of the well one of the best narrative settings I can think of in video game history. As an adult, the bottom of the well has been sealed off, meaning that you have no choice but to go back in time to enter the well and enter this place with the heart and mind of a child. At this point in the game, Link is no longer a child and isn't fully an adult either. Sealed away for the duration of his adolescence, it suggested that the growth of his character was largely physical, and in my mind at least, he always carries his childhood with him. When he returns to his youth, he still has the memories of the future he saw as an adult and what problems he's faced, and as such carries the adulthood trauma back to his childhood. He no longer really belongs in either world. In any case, it's only in his child form and age that he can enter the well, and therefore this moment breaks the established rule that Child Link has upbeat adventures and Adult Link handles the more grim stuff. And it's hard to say how his psyche is affected by the time travel, but as Link's younger, smaller character model becomes part of the imagery, and you traipse along these wet, dark, and blood-stained hallways lined with torture devices, you can't help but remember that this is who Link really is, and feel that there's something wrong with this 10-year-old having to be down here. All of this makes the place feel even more twisted and sinister than it already is. And I think that this does so much to make it a compelling setting. I really don't think this area would be as off-putting if you came here as the capable adult Link. In the rest of his adventures, the darkness of the narrative is separated by whether you're in the timeline where Ganondorf has already won or not. When you reach the bottom of the well, you have no choice but to realize that this abyssal dungeon has always been here, beneath the surface of your happy childhood, drowned away Your safety only separated from uncountable horrors by a well and an especially heavy rainstorm to dredge things up. Now, this is why I'd make a horrible lore archaeologist. When I'm in a video game, I constantly become lost in the atmosphere and forget the intentionality behind things, like why Dark Souls 3's undead settlement is the way it is, or why the Shadow Temple looms directly over Kakariko Village and the well directly below. I'm always kind of just like, yeah, this is how it is, and need someone more careful and studious to point out things before I really start thinking about them. As such, I did some poking around on the internet, and one of my favorite finds was the Zeldapedia wiki page. The main thing that it had to offer was numerous theories about the purpose of the Shadow Temple, namely that it was built by the Sheikah who built Kakariko Village, perhaps to gather and concentrate the evil energies of the land into one place. The presence of torture and execution devices suggests that it could have been used for human sacrifice, or to punish and imprison the enemies of the royal family of Hyrule, drawing a similarity between it and the Arbiter's grounds in Twilight Princess, which was also riddled with undead. If it serves a similar purpose to the Arbiter's grounds, that could explain why the Shadow Temple has traits resembling a prison made to trap and contain dark spirits, with its layout made to prevent escape. Perhaps it was used as a training ground for the Sheikah, or to fulfill more unsavory duties required of their role as the Shadow Folk. Now, we've addressed a lot of the setting, but I want to kind of turn to the characters of this chapter of the game. There's something that I find sinister about Bongo Bongo, the dark spirit in the well, which is in this line of dialogue where Shiek urgently asks Link to save Impa on the grounds that Impa is one of the 6 sages. I think all of the Shiek interactions feel incredibly special and are highlights in the game's storytelling, but I think it's noteworthy that when discussing Bongo Bongo is the only instance when Shiek seems remotely worried for the safety of one of the sages. One of the game's subtleties is the question of what the sages even are, and whether them awakening as a sage is something that happens regardless of them being alive or not. As loss plays a huge role in the game's narrative, the general consensus, though not explicitly stated, is that the sages have all died. None of them seem to express any knowledge of them being a sage until you meet them in the Sacred Realm, and the only person who seems to know who the sages are is Shiek. The only other instance where Shiek expresses concern to the point of intervening is when she pulls Ruta from the ice of Zora's domain, where we'd have reason to suspect that she'd live preserved under the ice. It almost seems like the death of a sage doesn't get in the way of Sheik's plan as much as them not awakening. I feel like that paints Shiek to be a really callous or sadistic person, which I just don't think is the case. Like, I don't think Shiek is orchestrating deaths to fulfill her plans. Rather, she seems like a character who carries deep regret and remorse and a guilty burden, and wishes that things hadn't gone so bad. But I do still kind of think that the Sacred Realm is a sort of afterlife, and the sages are unfortunately dead. I feel like if there's any one part that validates this, it's the scene where Darunia is going in to fight the, known Goron-eating dragon, and when you get inside, he's freaking nowhere to be seen. Clearly he didn't beat the dragon. Bro is dead. Anyways, pulling this all back to Kakariko Village and the Shadow Temple, the question remains, why does Shiek seem to express a special concern for Impa? There are 2 possible answers that really jump out at me. The first being that Impa was closely tied to Sheik's life in a personal way. I really don't think that Shiek is an uncaring person, as she even expresses in this moment that her intention is to take care of the village. But perhaps of all of the sages, Impa was the one Shiek hadn't yet accepted she'd have to let go of. In that moment of distress during Bongo Bongo's escape, Shiek forgot the critical importance of her disguise and cracked a little, pleading with Link to intervene with the endangerment of a sage that she just couldn't take dying. The second possibility is that if the death of a sage isn't much of a hindrance to them, Shiek urged Link to hurry to the Shadow Temple because she feared Bongo Bongo was capable of doing something worse than killing her. What is Bongo Bongo? What is it capable of? Aside from besting 2/3 of the wielders of the Triforce, we don't know a lot. One character who seems to shed some light on things is this guy, who is apparently called Professor Shikashi. Shikashi seems to have a focus on the Sheikah and is a primary source for a lot of our information on them. If you talk to him as an adult after he's fled Castle Town to Kakariko Village, he says this: "A long time ago, there was a man in this very village who had an eye they said could see the truth. Now, usually you have to train your mind's eye most strenuously to actually see the truth, but this fella, no, they say he had a different way of doing things. His house stood where the well is now." There are many theories about Bongo Bongo, including that he was this man, or as his title lists, was related to the shadow beasts of Twilight Princess, or as theorist Retrotron suggests, the leader of Sheikah traders similar to the Yiga clan in Breath of the Wild. One of my favorite theories, and the one that feels more grounded to me as it draws from evidence in Ocarina of Time itself, is that Bongo Bongo, with detached hands and a seemingly missing head, was a thief in life, as removing hands was often a punishment for thievery in different cultures. But why go so far as to both remove his arms and decapitate him? Decapitation seems a little extreme for someone who is just a thief, and doing both is beyond extreme. Perhaps his hands were removed first, and when he still proved a threat, they had to go further, killing him, sealing him in the well, blocking off the entrance and drowning it. And it still wasn't enough to contain him. It could be that the creator of the Eye of Truth and Bongo Bongo were the same person. But as invisibility is one of Bongo Bongo's greatest weapons, it seems strange to create an item that disarms himself. I have pretty much no doubt that the Eye of Truth has Sheikah connections, as the visual imagery is pretty clear. But could it be the case that it was made to counteract Bongo Bongo specifically, and this person dedicated to truth even went as far as to sink his house to contain him? I don't know how well the timelines line up for that. But to me, the bottom of the well looks almost like it could be sewers corrupted by Bongo Bongo's influence. But at the same time, the bottom of the well bears several similarities to the Shadow Temple, to the point of it seeming like an offshoot of the Sheikah dungeon, perhaps even connected somewhere underground. If Bongo Bongo was sealed for so long beneath the well, why would it, upon escaping with anywhere it could go, make an immediate beeline to the Shadow Temple, almost the exact same place? To get revenge on the person who sealed it down there, it seems to have succeeded in that and hasn't left after killing Impa, as if it has something else to do down here. When we get to it, it's made its way to this locked chamber at the very depths of the temple, and is playing a song on this massive drum made so big that it's a question of who could even play such a thing if not Bongo Bongo himself. What is it doing down here? If it's attempting to complete some kind of ritual, maybe finishing something that it left off, we don't know, as Link kills it using the lens of truth before we can see any further. Music plays an incredibly powerful role in this game, as the Ocarina of Time seems to allow Link to cast spells of some kind. Even as Link battles with Bongo Bongo, it plays the drum, and even in death it flails at its instrument as if putting in one last-ditch effort to complete its task. Something that I keep thinking about while making this video is, are the Sheikah really the good guys? They've sworn allegiance to the Hyrule royal family, and Impa and Sheik help you in your journey, but they also kind of just have this huge dungeon, way bigger than their entire village, just down there. When talking to Professor Shikashi wearing different masks, he always has the same neutral reaction except for when you wear two masks. He seems to display serious fear when you approach him wearing the skull mask and the mask of truth. The Happy Mask Salesman describes the Mask of Truth as follows. This is the Mask of Truth. It is a mysterious mask passed down by the Sheikah. With this mask you can see into other people's minds. It's useful but scary. Why is it scary? You'll find out as you grow older. The Mask of Truth isn't the symbol of Bongo Bongo or even Dead Hand. It's the symbol of the Sheikah, so why is Professor Shikashi, the person who seems to know the most about the Sheikah, so afraid to see it? Dampy, a gravedigger in the village whose surrounding area has the highest concentration of Redeads out of anywhere in Hyrule, is much more uncomfortable to see the Redead mask than the Mask of Truth. But Shikashi, who's apparently a learned professor, knows that it was the Sheikah who built that village and cradled it with the well and Shadow Temple. What other secrets do the so-called Shadow Folk carry?